going over how to create notifications in your Android apps. The first thing you need to do is download the notifications example template. You will find just a little bit of boilerplate code that we're going to be using, just a simple main activity with two buttons. The two buttons have already their listeners registered and created, so we're going to have to create some notifications with them. You will also find the playlist and song classes that we used on the context menu example. We're just using them to show some functionality. We're not going to be touching them or modifying them. And then we have a notification broadcast receiver. We're going to be using this for our notifications as well. Now, the first thing that you need to know is that the Android API 26 added a new functionality that's called the notification channels. They basically are meant to allow the user to have more fine-grained control over what notifications they want to mute. So instead of notifying or hiding all of the notifications from a particular application, you may just want to hide a particular subset of notifications from the application. So that's what channels are for. So the first thing you need to do is create the notification channel that you're going to be using to put your notifications in Android. So this is going to be done in any phone that has Android API 26 or higher. In our case, we need to do it because our target API is going to be 28. But generally speaking, you want to have an if statement that first checks if the version of your phone that you're running in is the version that requires this to happen. So if this is higher than the version 26, then we're gonna have to do this. Now we're gonna need a notification channel. New notification channel. A notification channel is gonna take in three parameters: an ID, which is the channel ID we have set up here, a title, and an importance. So we're gonna need to create the title. We're gonna have to create an importance. For the importance of the channel, this is going to be the default importance, and this and the importance that you set on the notification are gonna be used for Android to determine what actions to do when showing the notifications. For the most part, you're just gonna be using the default importance unless you're dealing with some high or different types of notifications in your application that requires to be shown differently. Now for the title, I already have this in my string resources, so I can just say the name, and then we're gonna be having a description. It's gonna be very similar. So channel name resource is the channel description resource. Now the channel description is an optional information that you can put on the channel, so you can just say channel, so description, and then we're gonna have to get a notification manager. This is going to be the system-wide notification manager, so we don't create an instance using new, but instead we call the get system service and we get the notification manager that already exists at the system level. Then we can use it to simply create a channel, and then we pass in the channel that we want to create. Now this has to be done as soon as possible in your application so that your app can actually issue notifications. If you don't create a notification channel, then your notifications will not be shown on the device. I'm doing it on the onCreate so that from the first time the application is created, the notification channel is created from the first time the app is opened. There is no issue with it being called every single time our app is open. Trying to create a notification channel that already exists will not have any effect. Now, once we have our notification channel, we can go ahead and create notifications. Now we're gonna have two notifications in our app. One is going to be a simple notification with just a title and a description, and a second notification which is going to be a more complex notification with some actions. Now to create a notification, we just need to do a notification builder. And we need to pass in the context and the channel ID that we want to issue this notification that are created with this builder into. Now we have a couple things that we need to set for our application. So the first thing we need to do, or that we're gonna do, is set an icon. We're gonna just be using some of the default icons that exist in Android. So let's use the button radio. Then we're gonna set the title. And then we're gonna set the description. Now the description is actually called the content text of your notification. Then we can also set a priority. In this case, we're gonna be using just the default. And let's set the title over here. And the description, here is another string. Okay, so here we pass the title, here we pass the description. Now every notification in Android has to have a default action. That is that when the notification is tapped by the user, it should open an activity in your application, or not necessarily the main activity, but just any activity that you want to open. So you do that by setting the content intent, and then we're gonna have to create an intent to be executed here. Now we're gonna be also setting the auto cancel attribute. That means that when the notification is tapped, the notification is gonna be removed. Now for this intent, we're gonna be first creating an intent. So this intent is just as you will do in a regular intent, just giving the source, which is gonna be the context that we are in right now, and then the activity that you want to open as a class attribute. Now, since we're dealing with creating it from notifications, there is some flags that we need to set. They are not mandatory, but they help to prevent the notification from messing up the application stack. So if you have an already existing instance of the application, it will just preserve the state of that activity or the activities within the application. And if you're just creating a new instance of the application, then it will take care of that accordingly. So we're just gonna be using some flags for that. Is the flag activity clear task and the flag activity new task. Now, just the way that it works is that you're not guaranteed to have an instance of your application open when your notification is triggered. Therefore, you cannot just simply create the intent from here. So it's similar to how it happens with the broadcast receiver, but the broadcast receiver is part of your application, so you have a little bit more leeway. You have permissions to initiate the intents. However, this intent is not going to be executed by anything inside your application, but by the notification manager, which is a completely different application. So what we need to do is create a pending intent and then wrap the intent that we have into that pending intent so that the notification manager will be able to execute this intent as if it was being executed from the context of your application, in this case from your main activity. So we pass a request code, we pass the intent that we want to execute, and then if we have flags, you set them. We don't have any flags right now. And this is going to be an activity. So it's going to be a pending intent to open an activity. Pending intent, pending intent. Okay, so when we set content intent, we register for that notification. We register it to execute this pending intent, which has permissions to execute this intent to open the playlist as if it was being executed from the context of the main activity. Now that we have all of the information in our notification, we actually need to call a notification manager. And this is going to be a notification manager compact for this application. And then we need an ID for the notification. And then we can say notification manager notify, that is post a new notification with this ID using the notification outlined in the builder by calling the build method. Now if we execute our code, go to our emulator, you can see the simple notification will open over here. If we tap on it, we will open the playlist activity. So that is being done by this part of the code. The notify part is the one that creates the notification on the menu tab on the Android status settings bar over here. And then set auto cancel truth is the one that makes the notification to go away when we tap it. And then the intent that we created is the one that opens that activity that we specified. Now we're going to create a second notification. This one is going to have some actions. So complex notification. So we're going to have two actions. When you tap them, they're going to do something else. We're still going to be using this. I'm just going to change this behavior over here. And then I'm going to change the icon. Let's use the mm, I'm just looking for an icon. Let's do this one. Looks like a nice one. Now just change the title, the description. The priority is different, the intent is different, and notice how I kept the same ID. So if we use the same ID, this ID is actually used by the notification manager in any case that you want to update an existing notification. So by issuing this one, we create a notification over here, just the same as before. But when we cut complex notification, the application actually overrides the notification because they have the same ID. If we want different notifications, we need to pass different IDs. Okay, now I don't want this one to be closed on pressing on it, but I want to add some actions. So the way this works is that you cannot just simply say execute this method using on-click listener because of the same reason as before. You're not guaranteed to have a running instance of your application, and it's the notification manager the one that actually executes that code. Now, what we are going to be doing is using those buttons in our notification to set a broadcast, and then use our notification broadcast receiver to receive those broadcasts and perform the actions accordingly. Now, how do we do this? Well, the first thing we need to do is create an intent. This is going to be another pending intent, but this is going to be an intent for the notification receiver. We are not starting a new activity. We're actually getting a broadcast. Everything else remains the same. Let's make sure I rename this properly. Okay, so this is going to be a different intent. Now, since we're going to be using it as a broadcast, we need to register it with an action. So intent, set action, and here is just a string that you're going to be using. This has to be a specific string, so by notation you generally use your package directory to define these strings. The reason you do this is because you may have another application that is also listening for a broadcast type of intent that has the action broadcast. So you might inadvertently trigger the notification receivers from other applications when you don't need to. So that's why you generally want to use a very specific action string when you're dealing with notification intents. Now we're going to create a second one. You can have up to 3 actions in a notification, so we're just going to have 2 on this one. So this is the update, intent. So update this one and update this one. Okay, everything else remains the same. Now, since we're using our broadcast receiver, we want to make sure that you have an intent filter on the receiver block, and you have the actions that you're registering over here to be registered for that receiver. That means that this notification receiver will be listening for any intents that have those actions in their metadata. So you could have different notification receivers to address different types of notifications. In this case, we're just using the same receiver to process both of them. This means that we also need to be able to differentiate on the onReceive whether the intent we received is the one from this one or the one from this one. Now we could use the action or we could use the extras, which we're going to be doing in this case. So we're going to be setting this news intent. We're going to put an extra. And then this extra, I'm going to be calling it the extra notification ID. It's going to be a 0. Certification, extra notification. Now, just keep in mind that right now, this notification ID and this one are not the same. They are completely different. This is the extra notification ID, which is going to be used by our broadcast receiver to differentiate between the two of them. So when we come here, we can actually get the notification ID extra by saying intent.getExtra, and we know it's an integer, so we just need to pass the ID, which is extra notification ID. I'll just delete this part. And then since we're dealing with integers, we have a default value of -1 in case this extra doesn't exist on the intent. So then we can check that value. If this is a 0, then we're going to execute action 1. You don't have to pass the context when we're dealing with these ones. I am just doing it in this case because I'm using a toast and I need a context for them, so I'm just using the context that comes with the onReceive method. This is action 2. You could have any other code that you need to execute here. They don't necessarily need to open your application. If you need to open your application, then that's fine. But broadly speaking, you don't want to have overlapping functionality. So if your default action already opens your application and there's no need to do any additional work other than opening the activity, then you will just open the activity. If you need to do some other pre-processing or some other code before opening the activity, then you will just do it here and open the activity from the broadcast receiver, similarly to how we did in the previous examples of broadcast receiver. Now let's just run our application. And I'm missing one thing. Show you what we're missing. We create our complex application, notification. It doesn't have the actions, so we have to do that. So here we have to say add an action, and then as the action, we need to add 3 parameters. So the first parameter for the action itself is going to be an icon. So we're going to be using the scene, play. Then you have the label or the title, which is going to be effectively just the thing that you put on the button. And then you have the intent that you want to execute on this action. Now we're just going to do the same for the second one. Make sure that this is the pending intent and not the original intent, otherwise it will not be able to be executed. Well, you will actually not be able to run the application. It's going to be saying that there's a mismatch on the type. Snooze, and this, just call it update. Now notice how I removed the set auto cancel. That's because I don't want this notification to be closed the moment I interact with it. a complex notification. Here we go, we have our two button actions. So if we click on update, perform update, if we click on the snooze, perform snooze. If we click on this one, it will open the main activity. Now, there is just one thing that from a quality of life, like if you click an action, you generally don't want the menu bar to still be displayed, you want it to be closed. So you can actually do that on the broadcast receiver. So what we can do is just two lines of code here to make sure that this is closed. So we're gonna be using an additional intent. And this is going to be intent action close system dialogs. And then you just say user context to send a broadcast of this intent. Now this is effectively just sending an intent to the system. To do this is we don't expect our application to be doing anything else, so it's slightly different to how we've done it before for the intents. Then we have to run our app once again on our complex notification, and then once we click the button, notice that this is not happening on the notification itself, but is done by the broadcast receiver after it receives that intent that we sent from the notification. So all that we do here is send an intent that is called by our broadcast receiver. It does the code that it needs to do, and then it closes the dialog itself. So that's it for the notifications. Thank you.